back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, December 30th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. I hope everybody is doing well. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So like I said, hope everybody is doing well, had a good holiday. So let's get into what we're going to discuss. So we're going to talk about the Commanders-Falcons game from last night. Commanders winning in overtime and clinching a playoff spot. We'll get into that. We'll also talk about the Bengals and their odds of making the playoffs going into this final week of the regular season. They picked up a huge win on Saturday in overtime against the Broncos, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have kind of struggled since we last spoke. They have lost 3 games in a row now, and it looks like they are going to be a wild card team once again. But there's still a chance that they could win the division, but it's probably not going to happen in my opinion. So we'll talk about them and whether or not they are a legit threat going into the playoffs. Now, they did clinch a playoff spot, so they're in, but now it's about, are they a threat to some of these other teams? And based off of what we saw these last 3 weeks, doesn't look like it. But we'll get into that conversation. We'll also talk about the New York Giants winning a game yesterday, putting up 45 points. And now that has kind of hurt their draft positioning because now they have gone from the first overall spot to now the 4th overall spot in the NFL draft. So we'll get into that. And then we will preview the NFC Championship game rematch from last year between the Lions and the 49ers. And that will take us right to the end of the show. So how this week is going to play out is we'll have a show today. No show from Tuesday through Thursday, and then we'll be back on Friday, and then the following week is business as usual. So yeah, this is the final show of 2024, and then Friday will be the first show of 2025. So that's how this week is going to play out. But yeah, it's been a while since we last spoke, and again, hope everybody is doing well. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Commanders' win over the Falcons last night. So, you know, these last couple weeks, Michael Penix has started for the Falcons, and, you know, from what we have seen so far, there are things to like. Obviously, last night was his second career start, so, you know, it's not going to be perfect. He had that interception early on, which there was some miscommunication between him and his receiver, but I did like some of the things I saw from him last night. And Jayden Daniels, I mean, right now, he looks like he is the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And, you know, in the beginning of the game, this game kind of went back and forth because in the beginning of the game, it looked like it was going to be a rout. The Commanders were going to run away with this thing. But then the Falcons' defense kind of stepped up. They held the Commanders' offense down. They did a very nice job limiting Terry McLaurin. I think he only had 1 catch last night. A.J. Terrell, their top corner, was on him, and he did a nice job shutting McLaurin down. So we saw a lot of Olamide Zaccheaus and a lot of Zach Ertz as well last night. He caught the game-winning touchdown in overtime. But this was a very entertaining game. There were some pretty good games this past weekend in the NFL, and this was one of them. And this, if you remember, got flexed into Sunday night. And, I was curious to see how Michael Penix was going to do. You know, now you go from starting against the Giants last week, a 1 o'clock game or an early game, and now you're playing in prime time, you know, for a playoff spot because, you know, the Falcons really needed this game last night. They held the division lead from the Buccaneers after the Bucs lost to the Cowboys last week, so they needed to win this game. and now it kind of goes back into the Bucs' favor going into the final week of the season. So, yeah, so how this game kind of started off, the Falcons got the ball, and Michael Penix did throw a pick on 3rd and 9. They were about to be on midfield, but throws a pick, and the Commanders turned that into 7 points. They went for it on 4th and 2, and it was a good play design. Jaden Daniels, he hits Olamide Zaccheaus for a 7-yard touchdown, so that made it 7-0. And then the Commanders kind of got shut down after that. The Falcons, they responded going 10 plays, 70 yards down the field, and it was a direct snap to Bijan Robinson for a 1-yard touchdown. He also had another touchdown later in the game. Jaden Daniels actually ended up throwing a pick. That led to another Falcons touchdown. That was the second Bijan Robinson touchdown. And then Riley Patterson from 39 yards out kicked a 39-yard field goal, so that made it 17-7. So, yeah, it wasn't looking good for the Commanders after the first half. But then, first drive of the second half, they went right down the field. They went 15 plays, 69 yards. And that led to Jaden Daniels connecting with Zach Ertz for his first touchdown of the day. So that made it 17-14. Falcons then punted on their next drive. They went 3 and out very quickly. And that led to another Commanders touchdown drive. And this was a Chris Rodriguez 2-yard touchdown. So that made it 21-17. And then later the Commanders made it 24-17. And, you know, this drive here by the Falcons, it was like, all right, let's see what Michael Penix is made of. And they went 12 plays, 68 yards down the field. They converted a 4th and 11 for 31 yards. Penix connected with Drake London. Then another 14 with Ray McLeod. Had a 14-yard run there. And then they got down to the 5, and this is when I thought the game was over. They did another direct snap with Bijan Robinson, but it went over his head, and they lost a lot of yards on that. They got backed up to the Washington 26, but then Michael Penix came back, hit Drake London for 13 yards. No gain on the next play. Incomplete to London. So on 4th and 13, he hits Kyle Pitts for a touchdown, and in that moment, it was like, are they going to go for 2? What are they going to do here? But they did elect to go for the extra point. They get it. And then we went into overtime. Well, actually, the Falcons did get the ball back. And they got down to the Washington 38-yard line. Riley Patterson attempted a 56-yard field goal, and it ended up being short. So then we went into overtime. Commanders got the ball. They went right down the field. And Jane Daniels connected with Zach Ertz for a 2-yard touchdown. And that's all she wrote. 30-24. They improved to 11-5. They clinch a playoff spot. They're now actually the 6th seed. Now, because they have, I believe it's because they have a better conference record, they now pass the Packers, with the Packers losing to the Vikings yesterday. Packers are now the 7th seed. So if the Commanders win next week, they will be locked in as the 6th seed. Packers will be the 7th no matter what happens. So I thought that was interesting. But, yeah, credit to them. I really did not expect the Commanders to be a playoff team this year. I thought this was going to be another tough year for them. But they have an offensive rookie of the year in Jaden Daniels. Dan Quinn has done a nice job. I wasn't a big fan of the hire, but he's done a nice job. And this team has definitely surprised me. And it's amazing how this team in 1 year was able to go from 4 wins to now 11 wins, and they could possibly go to 12 playing Dallas next week. I didn't see it coming. But it's a credit to that organization. They drafted the right quarterback, and Dan Quinn has got that team playing really well. So they're a threat. The NFC playoffs, the playoffs in general I think are going to be good, but the NFC playoffs specifically, look at all the teams. I think the Bucs are going to win the division. It didn't look good for a moment. I thought, the Falcons going to win this game now. But even the Bucs, they're going to finish with 10 wins. All these teams can make a run that are in the NFC playoffs right now. So it's going to be a lot of fun watching these teams match up against each other after next week. But, yeah, NFC playoffs have the potential to be really good, especially when you have 3 teams from the NFC North who all have 11-plus wins. And, we're going to have the Lions and the Vikings playing for the division next week in Detroit on Sunday Night Football. It's that game is gonna be really, really exciting to watch. So, but yeah, credit to the Commanders. Falcons, I mean, definitely a tough loss for them. I mean, the Buccaneers are playing the Saints. They're playing the Panthers. I think the Falcons will win, but it's really going to all come down to, Spencer Rattler and the Saints trying to upset the Buccaneers in Tampa, and I don't see it happening. But you never know. You never know. But in terms of the stats for the game, this game here, Jaden Daniels, he went 24 of 36, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 127 rushing yards in this game. Brian Robinson Jr., 60 yards on the ground. Chris Rodriguez Jr., he had 16 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Yeah, Commanders ran the ball for over 200 yards in this game. Olamide Zaccheaus ended up being the leading receiver. He had 8 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz, 6 receptions for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, only 1 catch for 5 yards. Falcons did a good job in limiting him last night. And then as for the Commanders' defense, 2 sacks on the night. For the Falcons, Michael Penix, 19 of 35, 223 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Bijan Robinson had 90 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Algier had 19, Ray McLeod 14. Drake London, 7 for 106. Kyle Pitts had a decent game, 4 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown. Darnell Mooney had 2 for 37. And then the Falcons' defense actually had 5 sacks on the night, so they got after Jaden Daniels. There was that one play at one point where it looked like he really injured his legs. But he ended up being fine. Training staff went to go look at him. He said he was fine. So, yeah, that's the last thing we need is Jaden Daniels getting hurt. But, like I said, pick it up the win. Looks like they're going to they are in a wild card spot. Now it's up to the Falcons, and the Buccaneers. What's going to happen there? Because everything else is pretty much wrapped up when it comes to the NFC playoff picture. Seeding is not finalized just yet because there's the possibility we could see a 1 seed become a 5 seed, depending on what happens with the Vikings and the Lions. But really the only thing that is not completely wrapped up yet is the NFC South. So if the Buccaneers win, they're in. If the Bucs lose and the Falcons win, then the Falcons are in. But based off of the matchups for next week, I do think that Tampa is going to get in. But we'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think about this game. What were your takeaways from it? Let me know in the comments. So we're going to take our first break of the show now. When we come back, we'll talk about the Bengals, their win over the Broncos, and how they could still make the playoffs going into this final week of the regular season in the NFL. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to now talk about the Bengals and their playoff hopes. They are coming off of a huge win over the Broncos on Saturday. That was one of the best games of the weekend, if not the best. I mean, the game we just talked about was pretty good as well. But Bengals really needed that game. I mean, they've kind of been in playoff mode, I guess you want to call it, since they were 4-8. I mean, you got to remember, this team was 4-8, and it looked like this team had no chance. But, they've rattled off now 4 straight wins, and they at least have a chance going into this final week of the regular season. And they will be playing on Saturday, so the schedule for Week 18 has been finalized. So we got the entire AFC North playing on Saturday. You have the Ravens and the Browns playing first, and then the night game is the Steelers and the Bengals. That'll be in Pittsburgh. And the Bengals need that. Well, Steelers need that if for some reason the Ravens end up losing to the Browns, which how the Browns have looked these last couple weeks, it's just, well, really the whole year. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I mean, I was at the game that the Browns did beat the Ravens, but that was with Jameis Winston at quarterback, and now they have moved to DTR, and he just has not played well. So I expect the Ravens to win that game, and that'll pretty much lock the Steelers into a wild card spot. But we'll talk about that in the next segment. But with the Bengals, though, they need that game, because at least if they can win, then they got to hope that the Broncos lose to the Chiefs and the Dolphins lose to the Jets. Now, when you hear me say that, probably not going to happen. At least when I'm talking about the Dolphins losing to the Jets. Now, they did play a game in Miami a few weeks ago, and that game went to overtime. The Jets played them tough, but I don't know. Well, we'll have to see, because if Tua doesn't play, because he didn't play yesterday, if he doesn't play in that game, that changes things. But if he does play, I'd probably say the Dolphins are going to win. But we'll see. But when it comes to the Broncos and the Chiefs as well, Chiefs, it seems like they're going to be resting their starters. I mean, they locked up home field advantage. So they're going to be the 1 seed once again. And the Broncos need that game. They just have to win and they're in. The Bengals, they got to rely upon 2 other teams losing. Now, they actually were fortunate that the Colts lost, so that's one team that they got out of their way. Colts losing to the Giants. We'll get into that later in the show. But they still have a chance. And it's just, you go back to some of these games early on in the season. If they would have just won at least one of those games, they'd be in a great spot right now. But it's just they've been playing catch-up this whole time. They might just fall short. Right now, do I think they'll get in? I don't think so. Do I think that they'll win on Saturday to make things more interesting? Right now, I would lean towards yes, just because of how the Steelers have played as of late. But then again, when these teams, when the Steelers and the Bengals met, the Steelers put up 44 points against them. Now, there was a defensive touchdown in that game, but still, they put up 44 points on the Bengals. And now, this is a Steelers home game. And the Steelers have lost 3 straight. You would think they're due for a win. But I would lean towards the Bengals right now just because of how well Joe Burrow is playing. Joe Burrow, if the Bengals had a better record, you can make the argument that he's the front runner for MVP. But because of where the Bengals are right now, and odds are they're probably going to miss the playoffs, he's probably not going to get it. Maybe comeback player of the year. Maybe. I think he's got a strong case there. But in terms of MVP right now, it's going to come down to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And we'll talk about the MVP race probably next week, because with only 2 shows this week, Friday I want to get into, matchups for the weekend games. Next week we'll talk about the MVP race. And yeah, but back to what I was saying about Joe Burrow. If the Bengals had a better record, yeah, he'd be right there too. But it's just, not the case right now. But the game on Saturday, I mean, what a game that was. I mean, that game was low scoring in the beginning, but then, when we get into the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, it was back and forth. And then that game ended up going into overtime. You had these incredible catches. Marvin Mims, that 4th down pass from Bo Nix to him, and he was able to catch that with 2 Bengals defenders around him. That was an unbelievable catch. And, early on in that game, kind of similar to last week against the Chargers, Bo Nix really was not airing it out. It was a lot of, short passes here and there, but he did air it out at one point to Marvin Mims for the first Marvin Mims touchdown. That was a great throw by him. Bo Nix has looked pretty good this year. And, again, we'll talk about the quarterback class, but this quarterback class has been solid. Even with the loss last night for Michael Penix in his second career start, you see that there's something there with him. This quarterback class could be one of the best early on here. I mean, we're going to see possibly two of these quarterbacks from this class be in the playoffs. I mean, the Broncos have to win. Jane Daniels is in. The Broncos have to win, and Bo Nix will be in. But I did like some of the things I saw from Bo Nix on Saturday, but it's just they were going up against Joe Burrow in that offense. And, the Bengals, as bad as their defense has been, the offense was able to overcome it. And that's kind of why you got the game that you saw. Because, the Broncos' defense is good, and Joe Burrow was getting hit a lot in that game. But the Bengals have one of the best offenses in the league and one of the worst defenses. So that's kind of why we got the game that we got, especially, in that second half where, things were going back and forth. But to kind of go through the game, the Broncos kind of, again, similar to what they did with the Chargers last week. They went right down the field. Now, they didn't get a touchdown, but they ended up getting 3 points. Will Lutz, 30-yard field goal. Then the Bengals went for it on their first drive. They went for it on 4th and 1. Didn't get it with Chase Brown, so that was a big stop by the Broncos. Broncos then punted on their next drive. Bengals turned it over on downs again. They went for it on 4th and goal, and Burrow got sacked. This was at the Denver 2. So things weren't looking good early on. But the Broncos couldn't capitalize on these turnover on downs by the Bengals because they punted again. And then the Bengals ended up getting a touchdown. Joe Burrow connected with T. Higgins, who had a big game on Saturday. 3 touchdowns. It was 7-3 at the half. But then a lot of action from the third quarter to overtime. The Bengals went down the field, got 3 points to start the second half. Cade York, 22-yard field goal. We'll get into him in a little bit here. So that made it 10-3. But then the Broncos responded. Bo Nix connected with Cortland Sutton for a 6-yard touchdown. So that tied it at 10. Then the Bengals responded. They went down the field. Another T. Higgins touchdown, 12 yards, made it 17-10. And then it was 17-17. Bo Nix, like I said, that deep throw to Marvin Mims, great throw by him. 51 yards, so that tied the game. Then the Bengals ended up fumbling. T. Higgins ended up fumbling. Burrow connected with him for a first down. He ends up losing the ball. They had to review the play because at first they said it was an incomplete pass, but he was a runner. Did take a couple of steps and then lost the ball. So the Broncos got it, but then Bo Nix threw a pick. And interesting sequence here. So you had a 38-yard reception by Jamar Chase. And then later in the drive, they get down to the Broncos 6. Chase Brown runs it for 5 yards, but he falls short of the goal line because I guess they were going to, milk the clock and, kick a game-winning field goal. But then Chase Brown ends up getting hurt on the play. And we'll see what his status is going into this game against the Steelers. But he's been really good for them this year. But yeah, so then on the next play, Burrow, quarterback sneak, scores a touchdown there, and that made it 24-17. And then the Broncos, they went down the field. On 4th and 1, Bo Nix connects with Marvin Mims. What a catch by him. They had to review it just to make sure that he still had possession. I mean, the ball never hit the ground because it did move a little bit, but it never hit the ground. Got 2 feet in. And despite, 2 Bengals defenders covering him, it didn't matter. He was still able to make the catch. Tied the game, and then we went into overtime. Bengals did punt to start off overtime. Broncos then punted as well. And then Bengals were driving. It looked like they were going to kick a game-winning field goal. A 33-yarder by Cade York, and he ends up doinking it off of one of the uprights of the goalpost. At that point you're like, that's not good. But the Broncos didn't take advantage of it. They ended up going 3 and out, and Bengals got into field goal range, but they did not elect to kick a field goal, which I knew was going to happen. When Joe Burrow connected with T. Higgins for this 31-yard play to get them down to the 3. I was like, yeah, they're not going to kick the field goal. They are not risking Cade York missing again. So on the next play, Joe Burrow connects with T. Higgins for a 3-yard touchdown. They win 30-24. And if you had the Broncos spread, I'm right there with you. That was a tough beat. But yeah, the Bengals win 30-24. Bo Nix, 24-31, 219 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Jaleel McLaughlin, he had 69 yards on the ground. Bo Nix had 31. Estime, 24. Marvin Mims, 8 receptions for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. I have him in one of my dynasty leagues, so he's looked good in some games this year. So, hopefully he takes another step forward next year in this offense. Cortland Sutton, 5 for 55 and a touchdown. Broncos defense, 7 sacks of Joe Burrow in this game. He got beat up in this game, but he had an unbelievable game. 39 of 49 for 412 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Chase Brown, 67 yards on the ground. Joe Burrow had 25 rushing yards. He had a 19-yard run in this game, and he had, the quarterback sneak for a touchdown. T. Higgins, 11 receptions for 131 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 9 for 102. Mike Gesicki, 10 for 86. And T. Higgins did have that fumble. Jermaine Pratt had that pick off of Bo Nix. And the Bengals defense, 2 sacks on the day. But, yeah, they get the win. That was a huge win for them. And I'm curious to see what the Bengals end up doing at the end of the year. Are they going to be able to keep T. Higgins? They still got to pay Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is definitely going to get paid. And T. Higgins is definitely going to get paid. I just don't know with the Bengals. If it's going to be with the Bengals. But, when you got all 3 of those guys together, between Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, this is one of the best offenses in the NFL. It just is. And it's possible that was the second to last game that this trio will be playing together. We'll see what happens next week, if they're able to get in. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting how they handle this, because Jamar Chase has had an unbelievable year. T. Higgins was banged up this year, but, when he's played, he's been solid. And this was another big performance by him. And when you lose T. Higgins, the Bengals will be able to figure it out. Chase had that big game without T. Higgins against the Ravens, 3 touchdowns. But I don't know. I feel like they got to try to find a way to keep them all together. But we'll see. But let me know what you guys think, though, about this game. What were your takeaways from it? So, to go through it again, the Bengals have to win, and they need losses from both the Broncos and the Dolphins to get in. The Broncos, they just need to win and they're in. And then for the Dolphins, they need, the Broncos and... Actually, no, they just need the Broncos to lose and they need to win because they're ahead of the Bengals. Again, I think it has to do with conference record. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about this game. Before we go to break, though, I just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat to create any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast that you want to see me acknowledge. It just makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. That is GSMCpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about another team in the AFC North, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have struggled, losing their last 3 games. We'll talk about them and whether they are a legit playoff threat or not. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and whether or not they are a legit playoff threat or not. It's been tough for the Steelers since we last spoke. They have now lost 3 straight games. They lost to the Eagles, they lost to the Ravens, and they lost to the Chiefs. Now, we're not going to get to the Chiefs today, but the Chiefs look like they are rounding into form offensively, and it's not looking good for the rest of the NFL. But, you know, when we last spoke, they lost to the Eagles, and, you know, all 3 teams that they've lost to are Super Bowl contenders. But, you know, when they lost to the Eagles, you thought, okay, let's see how they do these next 2 games. They got the Chiefs at home. You know, the Ravens they beat this year, and those games are usually close. So, you know, Lamar Jackson 1-4 going into that matchup with the Steelers. So, you know, let's see what happens. But it's been bad. Now, the Ravens game was close at one point, and then the Ravens pulled away. The Chiefs game, it's just nothing went right for the Steelers in that game. It was never close, other than when the game first started. That game was never competitive. So, it's not looking good right now for the Steelers. And it kind of looks like we're heading down that same path with them, where they finish with a winning record, make the playoffs, and then they're out in the first round. It really does feel like that's what's going to happen. Now, at the moment, they are the 5th seed. So they would be playing, if it stays that way, they would be playing the Texans. And the Texans, these last 2 games for them have been really tough. We're not going to get to it today, but the injury to Tank Dell tore everything up in his knee, and it looks like he's going to miss all of next year. And that was in the game against the Chiefs. Caught a touchdown. And, it's, again, second injury over these last 2 years that was season-ending. Because last year, he ended up getting hurt, was out the rest of the year, and now the same thing happened here. And it was a very emotional scene on the field there as he was getting taken off. You know, you had C.J. Stroud and all his teammates were very emotional about it. C.J. Stroud was crying. So yeah, that was that was tough. That was tough to see. Because he's been a good player for them these first 2 years, you know, coming into the league with Stroud, and, you know, now his season ends prematurely, and now he might not even play next year, and who knows what's going to happen beyond that. But, so the Texans, they're the 4. It looks like that's how that's going to be. So the Steelers, you know, if they play the Texans in the first round, you know, with their team being banged up and C.J. Stroud not playing as well as he did last year, you know, maybe you have a chance to win that game. But outside of that, I mean, the way Kansas City is playing right now, and you just played them, now that they're, you know, it seems like their offense has rounded into form. And then you got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, 2 MVP candidates. Look at how they're playing. The Steelers are not going anywhere. And the game against the Chiefs was very telling when, you know, the Steelers have a good defense. They could not touch Patrick Mahomes. Could not touch him. Where was his pass rush? They were getting no pressure on him at all. Nothing. They let the Chiefs do whatever they wanted against him. And on top of that, Russell Wilson was not good. turned the ball over in that game. It's funny. So the Steelers score a touchdown. Jaylen Warren scores a touchdown, and you think, okay, here we go. That would have made it. I think that would have made it 13-7. And then immediately after that, holding penalty. So that gets called back, and then Russell Wilson throws a pick. I think it was triple coverage on Pat Freiermuth. It was either double or triple coverage. Either way, Russ should not have thrown that ball. And then Pat Freiermuth fumbled later on in that game. And then, you go back to the Ravens game as well. You had, some turnovers in that game as well and some missed opportunities. And missed opportunities in the Chiefs game as well. I mean, there were fumbles on special teams by the Ravens and the Chiefs, but the Steelers weren't able to come up with the ball. Russell Wilson had a fumble in the Ravens game where he took off, and it was like the old Russ scrambling for a big gain. And then he ends up getting hit, loses the ball, and that's points taken off the board there. And, at some point, the Ravens offense, woke up. And, they took over the game. And they didn't look back. And like I said, that game was close for a little bit. But then, like I said, the Ravens offense, they took over. And, they won. What was the score? 34-17 was the final score. And then they just beat the Texans 31-2. Yeah, those Christmas games are not good. They were not good. But here's the thing. The viewership was very good. So the NFL is going to say, all right, well, we're going to keep doing it then. But, yeah, I'd rather just not have games on the holidays. But it is what it is. Yeah, it's just it's been a tough go for the Steelers. So 27-13 to the Eagles, then 34-17, and then 29-10 against the Chiefs. Yeah, no, they would have made it 13-7. Jaylen Warren scores a touchdown, 8-yard touchdown, and then Russ immediately throws a pick because the touchdown got called back. They did make it 13-7 later. Russell Wilson scored a 1-yard touchdown. But, then after that, the Chiefs kind of just took over in the second half. And, yeah, look, Russ has been good, I would say, for the Steelers since he took over. But here's the thing. He's not the quarterback that is going to take them to the next level. I think he's good enough where, the Steelers are in the playoffs. But going up against some of these better teams, I just don't think he's that same Russell Wilson that we saw in Seattle. Now, I think he's been better than what we saw in Denver. The Steelers have definitely gotten more out of him than the Broncos did. This is a good spot for Russ. And I do think that Russell Wilson, as of right now, he's going to be the quarterback next year for the Steelers. Because I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, do you bring Justin Fields back too? I think Justin Fields wants to start. So he's going to go somewhere else where he can get an opportunity to start. And there's definitely teams out there that would take him. But for the Steelers, I think they want to give Russ another shot. I think he's going to be the quarterback next year. However this year plays out. However the rest of this year plays out. I think he's going to be the starter next year. Because I don't know. Because Steelers can't trade up to draft a quarterback. They have to give up a lot to do that. I mean, maybe you draft one to sit behind Russ. Could do that. But I think going into next year, you're going to see Russ as the quarterback as of right now. And again, I don't think he's played bad, but he's not the guy that, is, like I said, is going to take you all the way to the Super Bowl. And the other thing, too, is Mike Tomlin. And I've said this. Steeler fans want to see this team go far in the playoffs. And they have not won a playoff game in 8 years. And how many times have I said that? Since the 2016-2017 season. The last couple times, or the last few times that the Steelers have made it, they're one and done. Steeler fans don't want that. And that's why, you have a lot of us praising Mike Tomlin. Yeah, they've never finished with a losing season. But when you go up against these better teams, or you get to the playoffs and you play these better teams, because this is just a regular season. This is a 3-game losing streak. But now you get to the playoffs and you lose. It's like, what was that all for then? Yeah, it's nice that you finish with a winning record and you make it to the playoffs almost every year, but we got to see results, and we haven't seen that. And I don't think the Steelers are going to move off of Mike Tomlin. Last year, when it looked like they weren't going to make the playoffs, and they lost that back-to-back to the Patriots and the Cardinals, at that point you thought, all right, maybe there's going to be some changes. But then they were able to get things right. Mason Rudolph came in, won those final few games. They made the playoffs, and Mike Tomlin still kept his job. This year, look, they're going to make the playoffs, and if they're one and done, Steeler fans are probably going to want changes, but Mike Tomlin's probably coming back next year. So I understand Steeler fans' frustrations because they want to see this team go further. And it doesn't seem like that's going to happen based off of what I've seen these past 3 games. These past 3 games are very telling. This showed us who the Steelers really are. They're a playoff team. They're a good team. They're not a great team because you went up against 3 great teams and you couldn't beat them. Now, I know I did, that the Steelers, they could beat anybody and they could lose to anybody. Well, these last 3 games, they lost to everybody. And those 3 teams are going to be teams that are going to go far in the playoffs. So, yeah, it's not looking good right now for the Steelers. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't surprise us and they go out there and they maybe pull off a massive upset in the playoffs. Because, look, the Ravens are the team that they can beat. They've proven that. And, now those 2 teams are even. It's possible that if the Steelers lose on Saturday and the Chargers win, Chargers will pass them. Steelers will be the 6th seed. Ravens will be the 3, and that'll be a first-round matchup. And I don't think either of those teams want to see each other again. Now, the Ravens, they won 34-17 in the previous matchup. But, now it's the 3rd matchup between these 2 teams. So you never know. And the Steelers kind of beat themselves in that game at certain points. But, yeah, right now, when it comes to the Steelers, I think we're going to see more of the same. I hope I'm wrong. But it looks like they could be one and done again. Unless I think if they play the Texans, I think that's a game they could win. But, the Texans are at home. It's just we went from the Steelers could be at home for a playoff game for the first time in a while to now they're going to be on the road again and playing against these better teams. Because, if they got to go on the road and play the Ravens, I don't like their chances. Buffalo, Kansas City, it's just, I don't like their chances. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the Steelers. But let me know what you guys think about the Steelers. Are they a legit playoff threat? Let me know in the comments. So when we come back from our next break, we're going to talk about something completely different from the playoffs. We're going to talk about the NFL draft. Kind of. But more specifically, we're going to talk about the Giants pulling off an upset against the Colts. And now they have dropped from the 1st overall pick to now number 4. So we'll get into that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Giants upsetting the Colts and how that has affected their draft positioning as we go into the final week of the regular season. So, the Colts didn't have Anthony Richardson in this game. Joe Flacco played quarterback. And, you know, based off of how these weeks have gone, the season has gone for the Giants, you would have thought they're probably not going to win this game. Maybe they'll move the ball against the Colts, but the Colts should end up winning. And the Colts needed this game to keep their season alive, but now their season's over. And what we got was something I really just did not expect. Not only did the Giants win, they put up 45 points against the Colts. 45. Let's take a look at what Drew Lock did in this game. Okay? So I started him in my semifinals last week. And I ended up losing. He put up 6 points. He threw 2 pick sixes against the Falcons, right? So, you know, I end up losing my matchup, whatever. He ends up that's for the next segment. He ends up having 5 total touchdowns in this game. 4 touchdown passes and a touchdown run. Over 300 yards passing. And the Colts just couldn't tackle. Malik Neighbors had a big game. He had almost 200 yards receiving. He had 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wan'Dale Robinson had a touchdown in this game. Darius Slayton had a touchdown in this game. Giants end up winning 45-33 over the Colts. And because of that win, they go from number 1 to number 4 in the draft. And Joe Flacco, 2 picks in this game. Jonathan Taylor had a big game, 125 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. You know, Giants' defense is just awful. It was bad once again yesterday. But the Giants put up 45 points, so it didn't matter. They also had a kickoff return in this game. Smith Marset had a kickoff return. And, you know, the defense was forcing turnovers. Again, not like the defense played well. I mean, the Colts, let's look at the total yards for both teams. The Colts put up more yards than the Giants in this game. 446 yards. And the Giants had 389. And the Colts picked up 25 first downs. Time of possession, they had the ball for over 33 minutes. The Giants had it for 26 minutes. But it didn't matter. Giants got the win. It's amazing. And, I mean, it is kind of funny, not going to lie, that this happened. Now, being a Giant fan, I'm one of those Giant fans that have kind of just been checked out. But it's things like this. Because the Giants were in a good position to take whatever player they wanted, which was going to be a quarterback. And, you know, that would at least had me and many Giant fans invested. Like, let's see what this will bring. But now, at number 4, what are they going to do? I mean, are they going to... I mean, again, things can change, but right now, the way things stand, the Patriots actually would have the first pick. Then the Titans. And then, I believe the Browns. Yeah, so the Patriots, Titans, Browns, Giants. That's how the top 4 is, according to Tankathon.com. Now, the Patriots, they got Drake May, so they're not taking a quarterback. The Titans probably will. The Browns, they probably will too. Now, they kind of adjusted Deshaun Watson's contract recently. But he's still going to be on the team. He's still going to be playing for the starting job next year. But the Browns are probably going to want to take a quarterback because Deshaun Watson, it's obvious he's not the guy. And for the Titans, I mean, Will Levis, he hasn't been good this year. Doesn't look like it's going to be him. So it looks like those two teams are going to be taking quarterbacks, and they're ahead of the Giants right now. These four teams are tied at 3-13, but the Giants right now have the 4. And the Patriots, they'll be playing the Bills next week. Tennessee will be playing, I think, the Colts. No, the Texans. They'll be playing the Texans, and the Browns are playing the Ravens. Now, the Bills could be resting starters because they're pretty much... actually, no. I think the Ravens can still get the 2 seed. Actually, no. Let me just take a quick look. No, the Bills got the 2 seed. So they could sit their starters. So maybe the Patriots end up winning that game. I don't know. But I don't think the Titans are losing to the Texans or winning to the Texans against the Texans, even though they won already. But then again, the Texans are kind of locked into the 4, so maybe they sit their starters. And then maybe, then the Giants can move up again. But I don't know. I think this might be how the draft order is with the Giants at the 4. The Giants have looked like the worst team in football this whole year, pretty much. And they might not even finish with a top 3 pick. It's unbelievable. And I really don't know what's going to happen now. Did this 45-point performance save Joe Schoen and Brian Dable's jobs? It might have. I mean, who are they going to take then with this pick? Are they going to take maybe another quarterback? Could they take Carson Beck from Georgia? What's going to happen? I have no idea. I really have no idea. Because you had an idea before yesterday because they had the number 1 pick. Now they won, and they're fortunate that Jacksonville and the Raiders won because I think they would have been even lower. But now it's just it's going to be more of the same next year. Even though this is very early on that I'm saying this. But what are the Giants going to do then? Do you still take a quarterback? Or, maybe depending on what the Vikings do. I know some people have brought this up. Maybe, if the Vikings bring back Sam Darnold, then you trade for J.J. McCarthy. Could you do that? It's possible. I mean, I don't know. But it's just, where was this all year? Now, I think this had more to say about the Colts and how bad their defense really is than the Giants winning this game. Because the Colts needed this game to stay alive in the playoffs. They were playing catch-up the whole time. The Giants, I think they never trailed in this game. They were always winning. And it's funny how, going into the game, the Giants had not won a home game all year. And they didn't want that, I guess, to be something that would hang over their head in history, where they just never win a home game during a season. Actually, no, the Colts did take the lead. The Colts did have a lead. They were up 3-0. But then, the Giants went up 21-6. And, the Colts did get it to 28-26. And then it was 35-33. But, no, it didn't matter. The Giants pretty much were ahead this whole time, the whole time. And, No, I mean, look. For the players, they got to be happy because, it's been such a tough year for them. And, just getting a win at least, is good for them. But for some fans, I mean, they are really ticked off over this win. Because now it's like, what's going to happen next year? Now, again, I don't know how Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward would turn out on the Giants because the Giants, they haven't been good. They had a couple of blips in the radar, like I said, with 2016 and 2022. But other than that, it's just been more than a decade of just bad football. And now you had an opportunity where you could, reset the clock and, take one of these top two quarterbacks. But now, who knows what they're going to do? And I apologize with my dog barking. A lot of background noise, doors slamming, but it is what it is. It's just been it's been a tough year for the Giants, and now they get a win, and now it's like, well, what are you going to do at quarterback next year? What are you going to have Drew Lock play quarterback next year for them? It's just, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what's going to happen. And now, next week, they'll be taking on the Eagles. Saquon Barkley, I think he needs 100 yards to break the single season rushing record. How fitting would that be if he's able to do that against the Giants? Now, the Eagles, they could sit him. But I think they want him to get that record. So, odds are he's going to play. We'll see what happens, though. Anthony in the chat, question about the NFL draft. Do you think a draft lottery could work in the NFL where the first 15 picks get dropped into a lottery and there's a percentage like you see with the MLB, NBA, and NHL? Right now, I don't think so. The Giants need more than a quarterback. They need to trade down and get more draft picks. That's also a good point. I mean, you could do that here now because it looks like you're not going to get one of these top quarterbacks. So you could do that, get more picks. But at the same time, if it's Joe Shane making the picks, do you trust him? Because, I mean, this past draft was good. But the Kayvon Thibodeau pick hasn't really looked like it's panned out. Evan Neal definitely hasn't panned out. Deonte Banks, he took a step back this year. I don't know. I'm at a loss when it comes to the Giants. I really just don't know. So they got one more game to play. Saquon Barkley, if he plays, he'll probably break the rushing record against his former team. And then we'll see what they end up doing if they let go of Brian Dable and Joe Shane. But yeah, Giants put up 45 points. They get a win. You think that's a positive. It's actually a huge negative in the eyes of a lot of people. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about the Giants' win over the Colts. Again, I think it's more telling on the Colts because their defense, I mean, how do you let the Giants do that to you? Were they just, not prepared for this game? They still had a chance to make the playoffs. Now they got no chance. They're out. So, yeah, it just didn't expect it, but it is what it is. So, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we will preview the NFC Championship game rematch between the Lions and the 49ers. A lot different of a game than we got last year, I can tell you that. So that's what we will discuss when we come back from our final break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to now get into previewing tonight's game between the Lions and the 49ers, a rematch of the NFC Championship game from last year. And like I said, going into the break, it's a different game. The 49ers will not be in the playoffs this year, and the Lions, they will be in the playoffs, and they could have home field advantage. Or they could be the 5 seed. When it comes to the 49ers, it's been a tough year for them. A lot of injuries and, blowing a lot of leads late. And that's kind of led them to the season that they've had. Last week, they played the Dolphins, and, Dolphins ended up winning that game. It's just, it hasn't been their year, and there's a lot of uncertainty, I guess, going into this offseason. Could this be it for some players that have been with this team for a while now? What are they going to do with Brock Purdy and his contract? Are they going to give him a big contract? Like I said, there's a lot of uncertainties with them, and I think this is a team, if they run it back next year with the same crew, I think they'd be a playoff team if they could stay healthy. Not having Christian McCaffrey was tough. Jordan Mason did a nice job early on in the season, but then he got hurt as well. If you can get a healthy Christian McCaffrey back next year, a healthy Brandon Ayuk back next year, you make some tweaks with the defense. I think Dre Greenlaw is going to be a free agent. I don't know if they're going to bring him back just because of, him coming off of the injury, the Achilles injury. But, you still got Nick Bosa. You still got Fred Warner on that side of the ball. Charvarius Ward and Ufanga. They do have a lot of good players on this team. It's just been one of those years. It's like what happened, from the 2019 season to the 2020 season. They made it to the Super Bowl. They lost to the Chiefs. And then the following year, they missed the playoffs because of a lot of injuries. You had George Kittle miss some games this year. Brock Purdy missed a game this year. Deebo Samuel missed a game this year. Juwan Jennings. Pretty much all their star players were out at least once this year. And that's kind of led to the season that they've had. And, when the schedule first came out and you saw these two teams matched up against each other in Week 17, you thought, oh, that could come down to home field advantage. But that's not the case. The Lions, they need this game. Well, it would be nice to win it because, if they lose, then, they're behind the Vikings. But if they beat the Vikings, they're back in the 1 seed. They'll just have the same record. But I think it's because of the divisional record. The Lions will then finish ahead of the Vikings, even if they lost tonight. The 49ers have nothing to lose in this game. They could play spoiler. I think with them being at home, I don't think they're going to lay down and roll over. They're going to play the Lions tough tonight. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think the Lions will win this game. The Lions are the better team here, although they're dealing with their fair share of injuries as well. But I think the Lions, they want to beat the 49ers, avenge that NFC Championship game loss to them last season. So, I think this will be a decent game tonight, but I think the Lions should win. Last year, of course, Lions, they had a golden opportunity to win the NFC and get to the Super Bowl. They were up against the 49ers. Looked like that they were going to win, but Dan Campbell was overly aggressive, and you also had Brandon Ayuk making that unbelievable catch that set up a touchdown. Then you had Jahmyr Gibbs fumbling in that game. This was the picture I used here for this segment is the one where I don't know what the 49ers, Chase Young on the play, he's not on the team anymore, but they just let Jahmyr Gibbs walk into the end zone on that play. Lions ground game was really working in that championship game. Now, there's going to be no David Montgomery here, but you got Jahmyr Gibbs, so, I expect him to be heavily involved. Look, the Lions offense is going to do what it's done all year. They're going to move the ball on this Niners defense. And it's going to be up to the Niners offense to try to keep up. And I do think that they'll keep themselves in it, like I said, but I just think right now where we are, the current versions of these two teams, the Lions are just the better team here. And maybe it is close for a little bit, but I expect the Lions to win this game. But it's going to be interesting what happens with the Niners. And the roster's getting older. But I still think that if they run it back with the same team, that they're going to be good next year. I do believe that. It's just one of those years. And for the Lions, they got their sights set higher. This is just another game that is a stepping stone towards their ultimate goal. And they've been the best team in football pretty much all year. And, I have them going to the Super Bowl. I think the Super Bowl prediction has got back on the tracks after some time, because I think the Lions are going to get healthier, and the Chiefs now have started to round into form. So that Super Bowl prediction still looks good at the moment. But we'll see. I did say early on in this show that the NFC playoffs are going to be really good. You got a lot of good teams in the mix. So, it's not a guarantee that the Lions will make it out of the NFC, but, if they got home field advantage, it's going to be tough for whoever has to go there to play them. But, listen, I'm going to stick with it. I know for some teams, I did not predict them well. The Commanders, the Broncos, those are possible playoff teams. Didn't really see that coming. The Chargers are right now a playoff team. I mean, I had them winning 9 games. I did not think they were going to make the playoffs this year. I didn't have them in it, but they're in. So they are a step ahead of what I thought. But if I can get that Super Bowl prediction, I'll be happy, because at least that's one of the few things that I got right with this year. I mean, back to this game though. Kind of looking at where both teams kind of stand in terms of the league rankings. Weather should be nice, so not going to be a factor here. Lions, top 10 in offensive categories. I mean, they're second in passing yards per game, 6th in rushing yards per game, 1st in points per game. Niners are 9th in passing yards per game, 11th in rushing yards per game, and 14th in points per game. And then defensively, Niners are still second against the pass, although they've had some games where they've gotten torched. Lions defense is 28th. Lions are good against the run, 4th against the run, and 7th in points allowed. Niners are 16th against the run and 19th in points allowed. So, yeah, I mean, the team has taken a step back. Brock Purdy's been okay this year. I mean, 17 touchdowns to 10 picks. That's not nearly as good of a year as he had last year when he was an MVP candidate. It's just been a disappointing year. They're 6-9. I would not have expected that going into the season. But, they have one. I think they have one divisional win this year. Yeah, because they beat the Seahawks once. They do play the Cardinals next week, but they lost to the Rams twice. They lost to the Seahawks, and they lost to the Cardinals. They only have one divisional win. And that's something that I'm not used to seeing. They usually do good against their divisional opponents. But this year, that was not the case. And if they do win on... Well, actually, no. If they win on If they win tonight and they win next week, I mean, you end up finishing in third. I mean, I think you still finish in third because the Cardinals are 7-9. 49ers lose, they're going to be 6-10. And I think if both teams win, then I guess the Niners would be ahead of them. I don't know. Actually, yeah, I think they would finish ahead of them. So, but yeah, I mean, Niners finishing at 7-10 or even 6-11. What if they lose these last two games? Would not have seen that coming. But again, injuries had a lot to do with it, and just they weren't able to close out games. I mean, the Seahawks game, Geno Smith had that game-winning touchdown. You had Kyler Murray and the Cardinals pulling off a late comeback against them. It's just, they struggled this year. And I kept thinking, once they started getting healthier, they got McCaffrey back, you got Pearsall back. I was like, okay, I mean, you don't have Brandon Ayuk, but, you could still, save your season here. But then McCaffrey got hurt again, and it's just, Nick Bosa was in and out of the lineup. He's been banged up. Fred Warner's also been banged up. Some of these guys are playing through injuries too. It's just, it's been a tough year for them. And, yeah. We'll see what happens, beyond this year. If they end up moving off of some guys, how does the Brock Purdy contract situation play out? There's a lot for the 49ers to consider. But I do think they're a team that's going to bounce back next year. I do believe that. There's too much talent on this team. And if they run it back with the same crew, I think they'll be, if they could stay healthy, they'll be back in the same spot. Similar to, where they've been in previous years. But we'll see. But yeah, I got the Lions winning tonight. I think the spread right now is 3.5. I think the Lions win, 30-23, something like that. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored tonight. But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think, though, about this game. Let me know in the comments. And that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again on Friday. So no show tomorrow through Thursday, but we'll be back on Friday. We'll make picks for the upcoming games over